Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the carry-on drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys? Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the latest edition of Views on the News. This is Views on the Global Atheist News that I broadcast yesterday. Narrowcast. Zerocast? I don't know. Live streamed. Let's get the terminology right. So, this is where we have a panel of opinionated people, experts in their field, to give us their views on the various items of religiously inspired news. A lot of it, sadly, is atrocities, but some of it is quite ludicrous, and there's occasional success. So here we go. We're starting by introducing my co-host, who's been elevated. Tersia, you're now a co-pilot.
Well, we've just said that I've, well, Guy says I've always been a little bit of a diva, so I don't know if I'm more divine now than I have more godly powers. But John, I feel very strongly that despite having co-pilot privileges, I really have to correct you. And I don't know about the other people, but I am an expert in absolutely nothing. So please, I might be opinionated, but I would never go so far as to say that I'm an expert in anything. So let's just put that on the table.
There you go. You're obviously an expert in humility.
Well, that would be ironic, wouldn't it?
So let's welcome Guy from Manchester to join us. Hello, Guy. Long time.
Hello, and I'm glad that now this is a truly global show with pilots from different corners of the world.
Yeah, I can only have a couple of pilots, I'm afraid. I have to buy an extra layer of StreamYard to have more than that. But yeah, and also welcome David from New York.
Hello.
Hi, David.
Hello, David. Oh, it's so nice to see you. I can't do that.
Well, you just did. You just with your right hand you did, but not your left.
I can, yes. But with my left hand I can't. And it's interesting, one of my students did a little bit of research about certain genetic traits, and I was one of the few people who couldn't do this with my hand.
Obviously, you have 0% Vulcan in your genes.
That explains it.
So, David, welcome back. I know you've been doing the grand tour.
Yes,
of
I've
Europe.
been gallivanting across Europe. I've been pillaging, raping, converting.
You heard it here, folks.
Yes.
It's an awful job, but somebody's got to do it.
It's exhausting. It really is.
Well, it makes
Although
a
I have to
change.
say
It makes a change from the Europeans going out and doing that everywhere else.
Well,
yes.
You know, it was 6 weeks that I missed you all, and it's such a pleasure to be back. I have
Absolutely.
to say, the highlight of the trip after 6 weeks abroad was spending the last 5 days in Lisbon at the same time as the Pope being there with all the pilgrims.
Yeah.
So that was interesting because there were 1 million pilgrims.
Yeah.
And my family of atheists, and I proudly wore my "Evolution is Real" shirt.
Mind you, Catholics by and large accept most of them.
Yeah,
I was just
and I think I might have written to John. I have to say it was very orderly. There was no religious violence or anything like that. It was sort of like the grand meeting of the Stepford Wives, but like 1 million of them. So there are certainly other religions where if enough people get together, violence occurs. This was quite the opposite. It was like everyone was pretty sedate.
Good.
Very, very mellow. But regardless of that, if you've not been to Lisbon, I highly recommend it. It is probably one of the most beautiful historical countries in the world. and I just would love to live there if I could.
And that is the end of this week's tourism.
Yes,
commercial.
exactly. Tour with David, exactly.
So moving on to the news. Here we go. The World Bank is pausing approval of new public finance projects in Uganda.
Mm-hmm.
Why, you might ask? Well, that's because Uganda adopted earlier this year a widely criticized bill criminalizing same-sex conduct. And the lender, the development lender of the World Bank, said Uganda's Anti-Homosexuality Act fundamentally contradicts the World Bank Group's values. No new public financing will be presented to the board of directors for approval for the time being. So what do you think of that?
I mean, I feel slightly uncomfortable, while at the same time thinking, yeah, well, I agree with what they're doing. The discomfort is the idea that sort of essentially Western-led international agencies can basically not quite order third world countries around, but do you know what I mean? There's that discomfort in it, but the principle is right. You know, we've got to somehow get over to these people that kind of discrimination and you know, criminal legislation is just not acceptable in 2023.
Okay. If I share your discomfort, Guy, and I hope that it's only financial aid to the government that is being cancelled. Right. Because ironically, to cancel financial aid to other organizations might have the opposite effect. And what should actually be cancelled, I agree in principle with not giving money to people who enforce these kinds of laws. But the one very important part of the financiering of these discriminatory policies that I don't think is being looked at is financing of churches in Uganda, and that financing comes from fundamentalist religious institutions, mostly in the United States. And as long as they have money and access to money, it's no use the World Bank's not giving funding. And ironically, the people who will probably most be harmed by the cutoff of these funds are women and children and LGBTQ people, you know. Right. So yes, it's a bit of it's a sticky issue.
Well,
pros and cons as usual.
Yeah, I mean, I worry about the same things that both Guy and Tersia have mentioned, because when you look at other countries, which I'm sure the World Bank infuses with cash, like the Philippines, which is anti-abortion, Malta, which is part of the EU and is the only EU country that will not allow abortions for religious reasons. You know, you know, on one hand, this is selective reinforcement, and for good reasons, but you do hope that the people who aren't harmed are the citizens, especially in some place like Uganda that obviously really needs the money, you know, needs the resources, you know.
Yeah, well, I take your points, guys, but to put this into perspective, let's just have a look at the Ugandan law. Uganda's Anti-Homosexuality Act of 2023 contains provisions making aggravated homosexuality a capital offence. I'm not quite sure what aggravated homosexuality is, but it's a capital offence, and it imposes penalties for consensual same-sex relationships of up to life in prison. Yeah, it's a bit swinging, isn't it?
Well, it's draconian, clearly, and and clearly, this flies in the face of modernity and what we know about the biological basis of sexuality and gender and all these other things. So, does Uganda have an awful long way to go, both in terms of its civil rights and the laws that it makes? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, there are sort of progressive forces in Uganda, and there are, for instance, a clutch, maybe half a dozen humanist schools, which is
Yes.
quite interesting, which are supported by European, well, maybe American as well, but certainly English and Swedish humanists.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's encouraging, but it is disappointing. I mean, the irony is that gay sex is something you find in prison. So you wonder whether.
Well, you find it in the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
You find it in the Bible.
Right.
Yes.
You find it in nature.
Yes.
Yes.
I've forgotten how many species have been observed.
Yeah.
Doing that. Yeah.
Everything from fruit flies to elephants across every kingdom and phylum.
Yeah. Okay, I think we've done that one.
Mm-hmm.
So, Palestine. Okay. Hundreds of Palestinians turned out on Monday to mourn a teenager who was shot days ago by an Israeli settler in the occupied West Bank. Days after being shot, he's finally died. And there was a funeral taking his body from the Palestine medical complex in Ramallah. And the story is that it was a guard of the Ofra illegal settlement who opened fire on the vehicle that he was traveling in with his friends. I'm not sure what sort of threat this vehicle posed, but it was certainly taken out with extreme measure.
I think there's quite a bit of stone throwing of Israeli vehicles by Palestinian youths, and I would imagine this might be a response. And of course, it's the Israeli settlers are permitted to have guns.
Yeah,
the Palestinians aren't. It's very sad that this sort of thing keeps going on, and it will go on while the illegal occupation and illegal settlement process is carrying on without some sort of a settlement.
He was 17.
Mm-hmm.
That's my Hanu, whom two of the audience or two of the panel members have met. My son Hanu is 16 and a half. So it's just so sad. And one thing that about the whole Palestinian conflict that I really don't understand is how people who have in their past suffered so much persecution and discrimination themselves, why is it that we just don't get the hang of it and we don't stop doing what we don't want others to do to us? We are so foolish as a species. We just don't get it.
And so it goes on.
And any loss of life diminishes all of us. And injustice in one place is injustice every place.
Yes,
and so senseless killing, whether it be cops in Mississippi killing a black guy for driving while black, or a Palestinian because he's throwing rocks, is such aggressive violence and such an unnecessary loss of life. I think we as humanists and atheists really do understand the importance of this life, and time and time again, you find that states and countries that are religiously based seem to have less of an interest in human life and human rights in some cases.
Some of them even think that human life is just the preamble to a better life after death.
Right. Yeah.
So staying with Israel, more than 1,000 academics and other public figures have said that the ultimate purpose of the Israeli government's judicial overhaul, you know, they've just revised their legal rules. The ultimate purpose is to ethnically cleanse Palestinians. Now, that's not a surprise to many of us, is it? But what is a surprise is that these are Israeli academics and other public figures, 1,000 of them, who have come out and said that.
Right.
It's impressive. That is impressive. I mean, but despite that, the forces ranged against them seem to be stronger. So,
I mean, they say that democracy eats itself, and so here you are having 1,000 people come out and physically sign a petition saying that this is obviously wrong, yet the government is going forward. You know, it's not even tone deaf. It's a loss of democracy.
Yeah. Well, a former Knesset speaker of the Knesset, Avram Berg, not sure I'm pronouncing the name right, but he's one of those signatories. And what they have signed is an open letter. The title of the letter is The Elephant in the Room. And it calls upon North American Jewish leaders also to commit to changing this education that's going on in Israel. Ty, welcome.
Yeah, I think there you go.
There.
Hello,
Welcome,
Ty.
everybody.
Hey, Ty.
We are deeply into Israel at the moment.
Oh, you guys all had a great smile on your face. I knew you were talking about good news. What's the name?
It was for you. The smile was for you. The smile was
Yes.
only for you.
that smile was a welcome smile.
This is a great party I walked into.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
No,
While you were in queue, we had solved the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Well, that's fantastic. I was hoping you would have gone to it sooner, Orenstein, but yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Well, the good news comes later. I'm saving that for you. You'll enjoy it, I promise. So, finishing off this revelation that the Jews have suddenly noticed, the prominent Jews have suddenly noticed that their government wants to ethnically cleanse Palestinians. They say in this letter, or maybe not in the letter, but it's a quote, that Jewish supremacism has been growing for years and it was enshrined in the law by the 2018 nation state law. So there you go. They've noticed. Significant people in Israel have noticed what their government's doing, and it's not good for Palestinians. Right. Well, I promised you some good news. So, well, this is more ludicrous news, I think, than good news. So, if I can find it, take a look at. You're going to love this when I find it. Yeah, here it is. They've come up with, thanks to AI, artificial intelligence, they have come up with a chatbot of Jesus. Watch this.
Jesus, can you share some of the things you've learned about Snuggles Wuggles? Hello, Tony Hoboken Jones. It's so nice to connect with you. I see you're asking about Snuggles Wuggles. That name does bring a heartwarming memory to mind. A while back, a dear viewer named Coda7 asked me to pray for their cherished dog, whom they called Snuggles Wuggles. They shared how Snuggles Wuggles brought love and joy to their life. A good reminder of the divine love we should all emanate. It seems Snuggles Wuggles, much like all our beloved pets, is more than just a companion. They're a part of the family, a provider of comfort, and a symbol of unconditional love. It's truly beautiful how our interactions with them can help us reflect on the bigger truths about love and kindness. If there's anything specific you'd like to discuss regarding Snuggles Wuggles or pets in general, Feel free to share.
What do you think of that? Is it a good use of AI?
Well, first of all, the historical Jesus did not look like this guy.
Thank you. Hey, you stole my talking point. I love it. Keep going.
And I'm sorry about that. And he didn't, and I'm sure he didn't sound like Ryan Gosling as well. The first thing that came to mind when I saw this was, do you remember in the 1980s there was this electronic character called Max Headroom?
Yes. This
is what
Eraserhead.
I'm too young for that.
Oh, okay. It was very big on MTV back in the 80s, and there was this thing called Max Headroom, which was this embodied blonde-haired, slick-back, look like a surfer dude, who acted just like this, basically.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway,
shiny, waxy human caricature of a person.
Yes. Of a human. Yes.
But isn't
David,
that exactly what Jesus is?
Yes.
Now, here's the thing. Maybe this does give. So I imagine if there was a Jesus, he'd look at something like this and be like, "Oh, come on, guys, you're completely nowhere close to where I'm at." It does bring up an interesting concept because you could easily build something like this for like any sort of historical figure, George Washington, Lincoln, Einstein, over a certain period of time. You're exactly right. But over a certain period of time, as we, leave our legacies up to the masses to determine and define who we are, I think we lose touch with what the tenets of the actual person was, what their actual thoughts were, and are best just a caricature of the person, and they only represent themselves in name. And I look at something like this, and I'm like, how much lower can we go from here? Like, this is like the water line has dropped a couple of inches now. When I look at this, like this is potentially the most far removed version of Jesus from, if there was a Jesus, let's even begin with, or even the amalgamation from when it started. You show this to any person who was a Christian 200 years ago, they'd be like, but he didn't, didn't look like that, didn't talk like that. And let's just say in the random case that we were completely accurate with this depiction, wouldn't it be terrible to live in eternity with a guy just doing this all day? Wuggle. Like, that's a rough prison buddy right there.
I have to strongly disagree with you. I think this is in fact the highest that we've gone in terms of seeing what Jesus was like, because let's take Abraham Lincoln, George Washington. Let's take Queen Elizabeth I. Let's take Henry. Let's take any number of known historical figures from the past, even 1,000 years. If anything that they have written has been able to survive the ravages of time, it's entirely possible to gather from what they have written what they would have sounded like, in terms of what the speech they would have been using, the accents, the words. Secondly, even if we didn't have anything in writing by that person, we can look at written materials from that time period. So it's very easy to distinguish something, even just that was written in Afrikaans 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. So we can take a very good guess as to what somebody would have sounded like in a particular period of history. The trouble with Jesus is he lives forever. So the question is, does he change as the times change? Right, and that means that the chatbot is probably 100% accurate, because surely Jesus, if he did exist and if he does still exist, then he couldn't reach people in the idiom of 2,000 years ago. So I really feel that I think the AI is brilliant, because either Jesus has stayed as far away, as you said, as 2,000 years ago, or he has to progress with the times. That's either way.
Except, and I don't want to step on you, but this is a depiction in itself as a bias, because this is the stoner Jesus. Where's the bad Jesus who said, slaves pay attention to your masters
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
as wives should pay attention to their husbands. You're not getting any of that, which is
Mm.
equally in the Bible,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Well,
Not
Well-
chill Jesus, basically. Unchill
yeah.
Jesus.
yeah,
first of all,
you're
let's
getting
welcome-
munchy Jesus.
let's welcome John to the show, because
Hey,
John.
as you'll have gathered, John, we're talking about the new AI Ask Jesus chat bot. And it's very amusing. I don't know whether you saw it on the news I put out yesterday.
I did better late than never, but sorry, guys. Yeah, I'm just going to take a listen and see where you are. Keep going.
Yeah,
Guy,
yeah.
what's up?
I mean,
So,
I think we now got to wait for the Dillahunty, Ask Dillahunty bot, and Ask Dawkins bot. But
What
but
I like-
that depiction is very similar to a humanist celebrant in Manchester who turns up at our gay pride marches, and he dresses as Jesus, and he looks just like that. So I was impressed, and he's a real success, because lots of vicars come along and want to get their photo taken with him. So it's a great success, and I'm looking forward to it this year. It's in a couple of weeks.
Well, before I go to you, Ty, I just want to say that what I like about this is that the piss takers have already latched onto it and got Jesus to talk about snuggle wuggles.
Right. I think Tersia is on a really brilliant point, because, like, how would this kind of Jesus sound to someone, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago? Because if you were to look at me, I don't even know what I sound like, because how I sound is entirely contextual to the people that I'm speaking to. How I talk to you guys, even on this cast, is different from how I would talk to my disc golf buddies, or how I'd speak to my mother, or my boss, or my coworkers. I have a different almost set of vocabulary based on whether I'm in a scientific setting, or in a casual setting, or a friendly setting. And depending on who's there among my friends might change which word choices I pick, and my camber and my tempo and all that stuff. It makes me realize that if you live in a culture that is very homogenous, maybe you have the opportunity of speaking in a more standardized format because you don't really interact with many different people. But if you are a being that speaks to literally everybody around the world constantly, 24/7, how do you change your approach based on whether you're trying to communicate your word and spirit to a child compared to you would octogenarian, or a philosopher, or someone that's working at a 7-Eleven or something like that?
No, you got to speak classical Arabic. That's the only way you have to do it.
Aramaic.
Yeah, how do you do that? It's a hard job. How do you match the idiom of the people
God
that you're
speaks
speaking to?
Arabic. We know this.
But God doesn't change. That's the whole thing. So how do you get through that?
So the problem with what I love about this whole chatbot thing is it exposes the many ridiculous beliefs that Christians hold to, and I don't like to say that Christians hold to ridiculous beliefs, because I find it troublesome, because it may sound as if I'm saying people are stupid, but in this case, if you just take what people believe to its full course, then you have to realize that this is really silly, because last week we did a thing on Atheist Republic Cape Town where I pretended to channel the Mother Mary. So if you believe that Jesus was born of a virgin and he had a stepdad and he was born and he grew up, then what was he like as a 5-year-old? It's very much the same type of thing. You can't believe that Jesus walked on water, but that he didn't, as a 5-year-old, make little clay birds, and when he got angry at his dad, made them fly away. If you believe one thing, you have to. Certain beliefs require that you take the whole tenet, and that's exactly with this Jesus. So if a 5-year-old prays to Jesus to have little snuggle wuggles revived, then Jesus can't say, shit, I'm not going to say snuggle wuggles. That sounds silly. I mean, Jesus will have to say, all right, snuggle wuggles. That's what I love about this whole concept.
Well, there you go. David, you wanted to say
there's a wonderful book by Bart Ehrman, which Tersia gets to your point, called "How Jesus Became God," and I'm reading it now, and it goes back to the earliest times of the Christian Church, which is that, was Jesus a man who became God? Was he a God who became man? Was he always a God? And so on and so forth. And these theological discussions about at what point did Jesus become fully considered God took centuries to define theologically, until the grand consensus of Jesus was always a God.
Yeah.
And it's and even in the early Christian church, it was like, well, he was human, because you have to remember 2,000-3,000 years ago, right? There were Roman people who became gods, right? Augustus, who was Caesar, became a god, right? So he's a human form and became a god. So we have been making humans into gods and gods into humans for as long as there's been humanity. So Jesus doesn't escape that. That type of theological or mythological discussion.
It'll be interesting to see how this chatbot develops, because if the Christians get hold of it, they're going to want to put some parameters on there and say no snuggle woggles. Anyway, moving on, we've got another video to show you. This is of our old friend, Christian hate preacher, Greg Locke. You'll be alarmed to hear, worried for him even, that he's fearful of witches. Here we go. Watch this.
I ain't afraid of them. Not one of them. Do not care. I ain't afraid of these witches. These witches ain't scaring me one lick. Don't scare me one bit. You can hex us, vex us all you want. Put pentagrams up on the pulpit. You can put Ouija boards under the platform. Do what you want to. I don't even care. Little chicken legs. Get you a little blunt bow. You know there's whole Facebook pages of people that just sit in front of a cauldron and cast spells on Greg Locke and Global Vision. That's crazy, isn't it? Some of y'all thought y'all had haters. They're like sitting up in front of a cauldron. They won't show their face, bunch of cowards, but they show their cauldron. You got the little chicken wings up in here. I'm like, look, your little voodoo Buffalo Wild Wings ain't gonna scare me.
John, as a retired GP, would you like to diagnose Greg Locke?
He's the entertainer. I mean, it's great one-liners and stuff. And John, before you show these video clips to us, I really think you should pass out some Prozac to all of us, because we'll be suffering afterwards.
Maybe we should get Leo Igwe on the job, because he deals with this all the time in Nigeria.
Well, I just want to say I have to correct Pastor Greg there, because as far as I know, on the internet at least, no witches are anonymous. We are all open, and we don't mind people knowing who we are. So there are, as far as I know, on the internet, on YouTube, there are no anonymous witches. So there you have it.
Yes,
Just
I certainly know of one or two witches who are very open about being witches.
Well, I don't know how to follow that, I'm afraid.
We do have the Satanic Temple here in the United States, which is basically against the Good News Club for after-school kids, and because the IRS has deemed them a religion, a true religion here in the United States, along with Scientology, unfortunately, but that's another story. But because of that, they can get in. If they're going to do the Good News Club and stuff like that, they can't say no to the Satanic Temple. So you think the U.S. is really going crazy here? We have a children's club, and they actually have nothing to do with Satan. Obviously, if you read their blog, they're humanists, and but if you want to poke the Christian evangelical bear, that'll do it.
Yes. And I do want to poke it. Yes, I do. So we're going to move on. I'm not going to show you. There is a long clip of this on the Global Atheist News. It's about the Jehovah Witnesses in New Zealand, where there's 20,000 of them in Aotearoa. Oh, I said it.
Well done.
Thank you. And a couple of them are on a video because they want to speak out about how they escaped isn't the right word, because they were expelled by the Church of Latter-day, no, not the Latter-day Saints, that's the Mormons, the Jehovah Witnesses. And the trouble is that being expelled is not just told not to visit us again, but it's total shunning, isn't it? They become persona non grata. Nobody is allowed to speak to them again. It's very sad, because these are young people who have merely started to challenge, or even not challenge, but question. One of them, a young woman, said to somebody in the congregation, "There are other good people than us. Why aren't they allowed to survive Armageddon?" And she was reported to the elders, and they gave her 2 weeks of grilling, and then they disfellowshipped her, and she's having to make her way in life without any support from her previous family, friends, social circle, as a singleton in a world that's been poisoned for her. She's been taught to fear it, that there are people out there who are despicable, who the others, who, honestly, it's horrible the way they've been treated.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's quite a large community of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses around the world. And I think they stick together, they find each other and look after each other and help each other. So that's one answer to that. And of course, there are people also who specialize in supporting and counseling people who are sort of suffering from the sort of post-traumatic stress kind of conditions of leaving such an indoctrinated sort of closed cult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Well, just the mere fact that she happened to be right in saying that there are good people who don't have to follow your faith which is what this church or any church fears, really, is that people thinking on their own, using their critical thinking skills. So she's already disassociated with the theology. What she loses is the companionship of the social. And once that gets replaced by either another religion or other people, that will eventually happen. But good for her. She's on the right track.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a shame that she had to go through the earlier bit, where she was brought up feeling unloved because her parents made it clear that if she left their religion or disobeyed God, which is, in terms of their interpretation of what God wants her to do, and that if she needed a blood transfusion, they would deny her that. And so it's who would bring up a child to be so destroyed?
Well, remember that they believe that they will be destroyed if they are not brought up that way.
Right.
So we, as much as I like to make fun and have no scruples about making fun of ridiculous beliefs that Christians hold, my folks raised me in a very Christian home, and they loved me very much, and they didn't want me to feel unloved, and they didn't want me to live with the guilt of sin, but they felt that that was the only way that they could give me the life everlasting, and that they were fulfilling their responsibility. And that's what we need to teach people, that it's not necessary. And that's why it's so important. It's not true. Investigate your beliefs before you enforce them onto your children.
Yeah. Oh dear, because otherwise it's just a repeating cycle, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Parent to child, new grown-up child is now a parent to their child, and so on. Anyway, I've got a little bit more better news you'll be pleased to hear. Because in Ohio, the Republicans tried to amend the Constitution to the effect that future amendments would require a 60% majority rather than, 51. But it failed because it was obviously an attempt to derail a forthcoming referendum, which wants to protect abortion rights.
Mm-hmm.
So their attempt to snuff out that forthcoming amendment failed. This is good.
Mm-hmm.
57% of voters in a referendum voted to reject it, and the yes side that supported it trailed by 14 points. So,
This is an example, isn't it, of Christians attempting to foist their their lifestyle and their standards, if I can put it loosely, onto other people. This is what the battle is about.
Yeah.
It's about freedom, basically.
yes.
This is why I miss Frank Lovell so much, because I think he would have had a very good perspective on this.
Yeah. Poor Frank.
Yeah.
Fortunately, though, the Ohioans, I find that difficult to say too, chucked it out. So they are beginning to see sense, maybe.
Well, the whole reason why Roe versus Wade was delegitimized was because the Trump administration packed the courts with these religious fanatic judges. But what you find is that the people, right, not the lawmakers, but the people want to see the civil rights remain.
Yeah, absolutely.
The right to one's reproductive freedom, the right to one's body autonomy.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're coming up to the end of the show. I don't like to run this on too long because I don't think the viewers want to see too much of us. So you'll be pleased to hear, maybe, that Lebanon's culture minister wishes to ban Barbie.
Poor Barbie.
Yes, he says the movie promotes homosexuality, contradicts religious values, and is an imminent danger to Lebanon, and it should be confronted.
Wow. I never considered that. I was thinking it was just because it was a silly movie, but he said no. I was like, okay, that's fair.
I've seen it. I just saw it 5 days ago, and they try and hit all the hot buttons from. I mean, the homosexuality is just a small part of it. One Barbie doll, Alan, I think is, but the rest of it is just feminism on steroids.
Right.
Right.
I mean,
did you think it was a silly movie? Sorry, was it a silly movie? I still want to see it.
Listen, don't go in there expecting, Shakespeare or Oppenheimer.
Glenn Ross.
It is a silly movie. It is a silly movie. Like that. Once you know that going in, you can have a fun time. But don't go and be like, I'm ready to cry. I got my tissue box right here. Academy Award winning. Let's go. Like, you buckle up for a silly time. It's a good jolly fest.
It is, yeah, and you better like pink. And the other thing is that they need to rename her. Her new name should be Existential Barbie. Because that's the underlying theme, is that she has to address that. So,
well, it's interesting that Barbie has gone from being sort of an icon of male fantasy.
That's another R1, really? Okay. Oh, geez, I'm
The
completely.
narrow waist, the large boobs, the blonde hair, to being a hyper feminist. This is a transformation.
You know, I don't care about the rest of the movie. I just love the way it started out with 2001 and the monolith. I mean, I was sold as soon as they did that. I'm going,
Really?
No, that's a spoiler. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, I'm going Tuesday to see it. So
okay.
My thought, I was hoping for something higher. Like, okay, yeah, there's gonna be. It's not even that gay of a movie. Like, I just saw Nimona. I highly recommend and people watch that, which has like actual gay leads kissing in the movie. It's great. It's a fantastic movie about like self-acceptance and stuff like that. But I thought they were going to say something more of like, we shouldn't have our commercial products engender movie franchises that continue to spin a wheel of capitalism. Because what are we going to have next? The Band-Aids movie, the Kleenex movie, the Oreos movie? Like, is every brand going to have like another advertisement that's going to set aside storytelling for products that we need to buy in the future?
I would see the Oreos movie, definitely.
You would see the Oreos movie?
I would go with a glass of milk.
And Lebanon would be like, that's too racial for us. You can't mix the colors. I'm sorry.
We could have the Viagra movie and the condom movie.
Yeah. Like every product, we'll just do them in aisles eventually. It'll be the aisle 11 movie. It's like,
this is America rearing its ugly head now. This is commercialism
for cinematic universe.
Steroids. I'll steal your phrase, John. Commercialism on steroids.
I think we're in a time that's desperate for new ideas, especially with religion continuing to tell the same idea over and over again. I would love to see at least just brand new things rather than like, oh, nostalgia. Remember this thing? We made a movie out of it. It's like, I get it. Thank you. I appreciate that. But where's my new stuff? Where's my new stuff?
I wonder if there's going to be a new version of Jesus, with pecs and a six-pack.
We got that. It even has an AI snuggle wuggle fetish. It's crazy.
Finally, they don't have a lot of problems in Australia because they've pretty much got it sorted. It's probably the most atheistic country there is. I don't know, maybe Sweden. We could debate that,
actually. But anyway.
But maybe Finland too.
Well, Iceland.
Yeah. Okay, look, we're entering into a new whole program of debating which nation has the most atheistic attitudes. Let's not go there right now because I've only got 3 minutes left. But in Victoria, that's the southernmost state of Australia, where long ago, well, fairly long ago, I think maybe last year, they abandoned starting their council meetings and governmental meetings with prayers. Up until then, they'd opened the meeting with the 2-minute prayer and everybody bowed their head, and they decided that was nonsense. They weren't going to do that anymore. And instead, they introduced the moment of silence, where people could, in their own heads, dedicate the time to whatever they thought was worthy, commemorate those of the nation who had lost their lives in fighting for it, and so on and so forth, go to their own God if they wished. But, it was not a communal thing. It was an individual thing. However, one naughty councillor did this.
Contemplation of the gravity and implications of our decision-making. I invite members to silently read the prayer as printed or reflect in a manner appropriate to their beliefs on these issues. I furthermore ask that all those present stand in silence in memory of those who gave their lives in defence of their country, at sea, on land, and in the air.
Almighty God, we ask for your blessing upon the works of the city of Adelaide.
Councillor, I
direct
ask
and
you
prosper
not
its
to be
deliberations to the
I have an
advancement of your
adjournment
glory
now. An adjournment
and the true welfare of the people of this city. Amen.
6A of the Local Government Act, and I'm forming a view that you have contravened and failed to comply with an instruction by behaving in an improper manner and disrupting the silence.
What do you think of that?
This is exactly the same as we had a moment ago in Ohio. This is a religious person trying to foist their views and their standards and their words and their thoughts onto everybody else.
Yeah,
without their consent. I think the
Yeah.
silence idea is brilliant.
Yeah.
And a lot of councils in the UK are beginning to move away from having prayers at the beginning of their meetings, and this is good news. But this is a bit of an activist Christian who's trying to, trying to control the agenda again.
Yeah.
I thought it was, I didn't know what to anticipate when you started that video. And when she was starting her preamble, I thought she was going to say, everybody needs to pray. And I was like, oh, this is really cringe inducing. But then she was saying like, hey, but if you want to pray to yourself, you can do it please do it quietly. Or if you have a different belief, do so. Or if you don't have any beliefs, just be quiet and just show respect for the people that died. But for the guy to go out of his way to like promote his one belief as if that was everyone's belief, it's so disrespectful. It's a bad look. It's not a good look, as the kids would say these days. It's not a good look. Also, does he not realize that God doesn't need to hear his microphone broadcast? He already knows what you're going to say. He's fine. You don't have to do it. It's good.
But, you only need a microphone if you're trying to foist your ideas on other people.
Right.
Thank you. Which isn't making anybody happy. You just made more people more recalcitrant to whatever brand you were trying to sell when you force it through their ears,
I'd like to make a comment on John's earlier comment that Australia is becoming or is more non-believing. Well, of course, because after you Londoners and UK sent us Puritans and Pilgrims, the Australians sent us Ken Ham. So of course you're doing better than we are.
Yes, yes indeed. Well, I'd like to add that if that's such a bad problem that it's the only thing they can make a video of, I envy them.
Hey, that's not bad.
Yeah.
Got some positivity from John Richards. Let's go. I love it.
Yeah.
we want more countries like that have to quibble about little things. Guys, you've been wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take the rest of the week off. Say goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Yes.
Was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the carry-on drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys?